Patiently endure whatever afflicts you. Imam Ali said, "Do not fear anything except your sins. Do not long for anything other than your Lord. Let no one of you lacking knowledge be too shy to ask until he learns. Do not let one who has asked something he lacks knowledge of refrain from saying, 'I do not know.'"
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-'aliyyil 'azim. To reiterate what Maulana that said, that this is a special time, obviously Ramadan, but that also Ramadan and Jum'ah, and that when these two combine, that there's even more blessing and there's even more mercy, and especially the time of Asr on Jum'ah. This is a special time. There's a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said that there is a sa'ah, there is a time on the day of Jum'ah that no one will ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this time for anything except that He will be granted that thing. That any type of needs that they have, any type of prayers, anything that they're asking for, if they ask Allah ta'ala during that sa'ah, during that appointed time, is that it will be granted to them. And that like many of the other things such as Laylatul Qadr and that other special times, that it's hidden. We don't know exactly when that time is on the day of Jum'ah, and there's over 50 opinions of the scholars about when that time is. Is it the time when the Imam first stands on the pulpit for the Jum'ah? Is it the time between his sitting between the two khutbahs? Is it the time between his finishing the khutbah and the actual prayer, or immediately after the prayer? There's 50 different opinions amongst the ulama about when that time is. That, however, that is the opinion of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra, that this sa'ah, this time, is late Asr. So after Asr, just before sunset, and as Maulana mentioned, is that this is a time, the night of Jum'ah and the day of Jum'ah are both days that we should send special prayers upon the Prophet ﷺ. And there's a hadith that says, whoever prays upon me 80 times after Asr on Jum'ah, is that He will have forgiven for him 80 years worth of sins. And then in another narration actually specifies that salah on the Prophet ﷺ, and so that there's a great blessing in sending salawat upon Sayyidina Muhammad ﷺ in this most special day. We reach the point in the book of Sayyidina Imam al-Muhasibi where he says that fear Allah in relation to your deen, and that deen is important. Is that you find that when we do things and fix things, our homes, or that we want something done we need something done on our car, or whatever it might be, that we find that you want to find the best mechanic, or you want to find the best construction worker, or that if you're going to get your taxes done, that you find the best tax agent. But oftentimes when it comes to the deen, that we think that, oh, anything that goes is fine. And that what Imam al-Muhasibi is saying here, وَخَافِ اللَّهِ فِي دِينِكَ, is that this is, we have to have a special wariness when it comes to the deen. That this is deen. The most scrupulous that we should be is in the affairs of the deen. And this is why that one of the early imams of the Tabi'een, that Ibn Sirin, that he said that إِنَّ هَذَا الْأَمْرِ دِينٌ فَانْظُرُوا عَمَّنْ تَأْخُذُونَهُ, that this is an affair of the deen. So look carefully to those that you take your deen from. And that if you look at the early people, that there was ajaib, there was wonders to their degree of scrupulousness of who they took from and who they didn't take from. And that there was, in the time of Imam Malik, an individual that Imam Malik refused to take hadith from him, despite his despite the level of his memorization, despite the amount of knowledge that he had, because that he noticed is that he used to lure his donkey by placing some food in front of it to get it to do something, and then he wouldn't actually give the donkey the food. He says that if I can't trust this individual dealing with animals, how can I trust them in relation to human beings? Yani something of that nature. That one time Imam Malik became very upset because someone asked him about hadith while standing up and walking in the streets of Medina. These were people of adab. Imam Malik is one of the great imams of adab. That if you look at the way that he was and the ta'aleem that he had for the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, is that when people used to come to ask him about hadith, is that he used to go take a ghusl and take a bath, and then that he would wear his best clothes, and that he would sit in a particular way, and he would burn aloe woods, and that he would give ta'aleem to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, such that one time while he was narrating hadith, is that he was stung by a scorpion 17 times, and that they noticed as he's speaking that his face started to change color. But he was narrating the hadith, and he continued until he finished, and then after that he went to heal himself, and they asked him, what's happening? He said he was stung by a scorpion. He said, but I didn't want to cut off the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. This is adab, and this goes along with it, and that these are the people that we should be seeking out, and that in the reverse is that there was a man that actually Imam Malik didn't used to take hadith from, and that he noticed that the more time that he spent with this man, is that every time that the Prophet ﷺ would be mentioned in his presence, is that he used to weep and the face of his color would change. And he actually started taking hadith from this person because of that criterion. And this tells us is that beyond merely the level of academic rigor and the outward aspect of preservation of hadith, there's something special that our tradition preserves. And that there's something that is special, its reality is a light in the heart. And the same Imam Malik who we're referring to, that he's the one that said, knowledge is not about knowing a lot of information, having a lot of narrations and quoting things. He says knowledge is a light that Allah Ta'ala places in your heart. That's the reality of knowledge, is it's a light. And this is why that our scholars went to great extents to preserve the outer casing that goes along with this knowledge. And that this is something that is sacred and that we should take it seriously. And so, وَخَفِ اللَّهِ فِي دِينِكَ, and that have this awareness, this fearful awareness, because fear, that although it's not a very loved emotion in the modern world, is that most of the time when we hear about fear, that we hear about it in a very negative context. But correct fear, religious fear that rooted in a correct understanding of Islamic spirituality, is supposed to be a motivating factor. And that even at the basic physiological level, that naturally human beings that because of the fear that they ward off harm from them, and because of the desires that they have, that they procure benefit. This is natural. This is part of the way that our brains have been biologically wired. However, is that there's a deeper type of fear, though. The most important type of fear is a fear of the unknown nature of this world that is going to come and everything that we're doing now to prepare for it. And that fear, that is what the scholars of this science refer to as the khawf muz'ij, is that this fear that causes one to squirm internally, that it moves them and it urges them and it makes them feel a deep sense of discomfort. All these things that we normally rely upon, that our wealth and our families and other people and so forth, and our looks and our positions, that all of a sudden we realize, oh my God, all of this is, none of this is real. And all of this is going to fail us. It could break at any time. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves you, He will cause all these things to break down in your life. That all the means by which that you are laying upon, if you're beloved to Allah, He'll break them for you. Because in the end, He only wants you to love Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. He only wants you to rely upon Him. It doesn't mean that you don't partake in the world and enter into it, but there's a difference between someone who enters into the asbab, all the different means, relying upon Allah Ta'ala, and between someone who enters into the means, relying upon the means and on themselves. And for this is our masdar of quwwah. This is the source of strength for us as believers. That if people are trapped in the means, Allah will leave you to the means. He'll leave you to the means. And that then it's just a matter of means versus means. Whoever has higher means, better means, greater means, is that though, most of the time, that win that struggle of whatever type of nature it is. That if, however, that you rely upon Allah, and you enter into your affairs that billah, through Allah, then that is no longer a case of the means. You still have to take the asbab. Allah says that prepare for them what you are able from that strength and the tying of horses. It's in the context of the actual physical jihad, holy war. However, that this applies to all means, but that when you have to take the means, and if you're not taking the means, you're falling short as a believer. But you take the means, trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and in that case that you do that, Allah ta'ala will give you victory in all of the meanings of victory. That victory for us is not just an outward victory on the battlefield. Is that every single day that we're in need of multiple victories. We're in need of many victories. Is that you having that urge that you want to sit down and recite Qur'an, but all of a sudden that you have a little headache so that you're just about to become weak and go do something else. If Allah Ta'ala gives you tawfiq to not succumb to that thought, to divert you, that's victory. And that's the greatest type of victory. That is the basis for all the type of victory. Allah Ta'ala gives you that victory to be able to be strong and then to recite Qur'an or to hakada. And that this is the etiquette of the awliya and the salihin, is that you'll find that there are certain people that they always take initiative. My sister works for Microsoft in Seattle, and that they have this thing that she tells me that whenever you ask people a question about something to do that has to do with either understanding something on, they have this whole huge campus because they have so many employees, or you need to figure out something related to your paycheck or whatever it might be, is that people send you a link that they don't give you the answer. And the whole point is that the culture there is a culture of that taking initiative. Who's going to take initiative? And when you speak to executives, is that they will tell you is that 20% of the people usually are the ones that do all the work, and the other 80% that piggyback on the rest. Is that the people that actually take initiative are always going to be few. But those people have something special that's going to come your way. When you find people, and this is the thing, is that this is why these people understand the way that the dunya works, and that her position is that she recruits high-end executives, and so that she has the top 10 universities where they recruit these people from, and that she's meeting these people all the time and scrutinizing their traits and so forth, and that trying to get the best of the best, and that the extent to which that they do that for dunya. And subhanAllah, that sometimes it makes you wonder that what level we're at, and that how we're not even willing to do even a portion of that for the deen, and that people are doing this for dunya. And subhanAllah, that this is the part of the nature of the world in which we live. But however, that one of the poets said in this regard, لَأَسْتَسْهِلَنَّ السَّعْبَ وَأُدْرِكَ الْمُنَى فَمَا قَادَتِ الْآمَالُ إِلَّا لِصَابِرِ. That this is one of the wonderful things about the Arabic language, is all of the different morphological patterns. And that this poet said, لَأَسْتَسْهِلَنَّ السَّعْبَ. Istashala is talab al-suhula. It's to seek to make something easy. And then when you say it with the noon al-tawqid al-thaqila, لَأَسْتَسْهِلَنَّ, that I will continually, and it's emphasizing, I will continually make difficult things easy. MashaAllah, we got Arabic on the board there, MashaAllah, we're in Hana right now. that will continually make difficult things easy. That o udrika, this is one of the rare times o usually is a conjunction that means or. Right? But here in this context it means hatta. That Imam Sibawayh said that when I'm going to die, and that there's going to still be fi nafsi shay min hatta. That hatta is one of the most difficult particles to understand in the ocean of Arabic grammar. Arabic grammar, if you want to learn something easy grammar, learn Persian. Right? Arabic grammar never ends. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Even if you memorize the alfiyah and all the shuruh of the alfiyah and the hawashi on the shuruh of the alfiyah, and then you even study Mughni al-Labib, and you go beyond that, that la hawla wa la quwwata, it never ends. The Arabic language is a bahr. It is a shoreless ocean. But, and this is why that Imam Shafi says in his, I believe it is in the and Allah knows best, that la yuqit bil lugha illa nabi, that only a prophet will fully encompass a language. And this is one of the miracles of the Prophet ﷺ, is that his knowledge of the Arabic language. that أفصح من نطق بلغة الضاد, that he is the most eloquent of anyone who spoke the language of Dad. It's because the Arabs used to think that Dad, they were the only language in the world that had the letter Dad, that amongst the Semitic languages in their regions, this is definitely the case. However, that this idea of لَسْتَسْهِلَنَّ الصَّعْبَ وَأُدْرِكَ الْمُنَى, that I will continually make difficult things easy, that this is initiative, that where are those who are going to take initiative, especially when it comes to the deen, is that going beyond merely the surface level, where that you want to scrutinize your level of practice, you want to scrutinize who it is that you're taking from, you want to scrutinize your approach to the deen, and really give this the time that it deserves. Like literally think about the time that we take to prepare our tax returns. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Right? Literally, like the hours that we spend getting everything, all of the various tax deductions, all of this other stuff that we put into that, right, for a number of reasons. But aside from the reasons, the time that goes into it, right, and all of these other aspects of our dunya, that why is it that we don't put in even a fraction of that into that time into our deen? That this is what he means by this, and that he also says here, in hope for good from God in all of your affairs, وَرْجُوهُ فِي جَمِيعِ أُمُورِكَ, and that raja is hope, and your amr is your affair. So he's saying have hope in Allah Ta'ala in all of your different affairs, and that you never know. This is why that it's actually rooted in a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, is that our Prophet taught us ﷺ to never belittle anyone and to never belittle any act. And the reason is that that person that you're belittling, he might be someone who's close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? They might be a person who's on the doorstep with a sign asking for money. Don't belittle anyone. No matter who that person is, never belittle anyone. You have to really protect your heart, especially when you walk by areas where people are not as privileged as one might be, is that you have to be very careful, and that the way that you speak about other people or the way that you treat other people, because that your belief that you have in your heart as iman, that if you transgress against the rights of the son of any of the children of Adam, is that it could very well be a means for someone to lose that most precious thing that you were gifted, not that you earned. That faith is a divine gift, period. Faith is a divine gift. The intellect can help get you to the door. Your ijtihad and your hard work can help get you to the door. That your inquiry and your reflection and your taking things seriously can help get you to the door. But that moment of the sharh sadr, where Allah Ta'ala expands your heart and grants you belief, that's a divine gift. In the end, that you didn't do anything to deserve that, nor did you, even though that you took the means to take it, that was from Allah Ta'ala, because He didn't have to give you that. Belief is a divine gift. But here, hoping in Allah Ta'ala in all of your different affairs, is that you never know in that affair that you might deem to be something insignificant or trivial, is that in it is the rida of Allah. Or in that thing that you think that is trivial or insignificant, that in it is the sakhat of Allah. So that you can attain the contentment of Allah, or you can attain the wrath of Allah, in even the smallest of things. And that Imam al-Ghazali, Hujjat al-Islam, is that they mentioned that Allah Ta'ala knows best, is that he received his fath because that he was writing back in the day where they used to use inkwells, and they used to have like an inkwell filled with ink, and they would dip their pen in and they would write. And that as he's dipping his pen into the ink, that a fly landed on the tip of the pen, and that instead of just shooing the fly away, Imam Ghazali left it there and let the fly drink. And then once it had taken its fill and flew away, then he started writing again. And they said that he received his opening, right, because of the adab that he had and the care that he showed for even a fly. Now, don't tell your wife that, because then, there's many of the stories of the people that came before, so you don't tell your wives in particular. That there used to be a person who had rats his house was infested with rats, and he never did anything about it. And they asked him, like, what's wrong with you? You have rats in your house, but you're not doing anything about it. He says that if I do something to rid my house of the rats, they're going to go to my neighbor's house. Right, so I might as well just, let them stay in my house because they're going to go to my neighbor's house. Some of them even, instead of tiring out the ants to have to come all the way to the table, that they put food by the ant holes, right? So that they just get the food and khalas. These types of things that, normal people don't necessarily do them or even think about them. But al-abraru alladhina la yu'luna dar, is that the righteous are those that they don't even hurt an ant. That there are people that are in tune with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creation. This is a higher level of ihsan, obviously, that is beyond the basic level of performance of the Sharia. But this is an advice to us, is that we have hope in Allah Ta'ala in everything that we do, because we don't know. Every single one of us here in this room and on the face of Mother Earth, that we all have an individual path to Allah. Yes, collectively, that the Quran and the Sunnah have given us the direction about this is the ways of drawing near to Allah Ta'ala. These various archetypes of different things and traits that we could do, or acts of worship, or traits and qualities that we can adopt. However, every single one of us individually has a particular way. That for Ahmed it might be bir al-walidain. For Zayd it might be qiyam al-layl. For Umar that it might be sadaqah. That everyone has a specific way, especially through which they draw near to Allah Ta'ala, and we have to find out what that is. And one of the great ways of knowing this is looking to where Allah Ta'ala has placed you. And there's a deep secret in this. And this is something that goes against oftentimes the desires and the raghabat of our own nufus, of our souls. Because that we have voluntary relationships and we have involuntary relationships. And when you see that you're placed in an involuntary relationship, meaning that you have no choice here, you have to maintain this relationship. And only in the extreme conditions can you ever distance yourself from that person. But for the most part, you can't. That those relationships that we have, and then we have situations as well that are involuntary. That oftentimes those are the main ways for that particular individual to draw near to their Lord. Is that they submit to where Allah Ta'ala has placed them in that individual instance. This is why Imam Malik was asked about studying sacred knowledge, and he responded by saying that studying sacred knowledge is a great thing. He says, however, look to where Allah has placed you. Look to where Allah has placed you. Meaning that if you have obligations that take precedence, like taking care of your parents, for instance, such that it prevents you from going overseas to study or going to a place fairly locally to study, that you have to place that before your desire to study sacred knowledge, given that you fulfill the basic requirements of the individual obligations. Now, so then he says here that be patient patiently endure whatever afflicts you. And then he quotes the statement of Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu, that do not fear anything except your sins. La ilaha illallah. Do not fear anything except your sins. Do not long for anything other than your Lord. Let no one of you lacking knowledge be too shy to ask until he learns. Do not let one who has asked something he lacks knowledge of refrain from saying, I do not know. And so that they asked Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu, that how did you attain everything that you attained? He said, بِلِسَانٍ سَؤُولٍ وَقَلْبٍ عَقُولٍ. With a tongue, used to ask a lot of good questions. Good in brackets here because that's understood. Asking a lot of good questions. And that with a mind that, with a heart that was very attentive, with a powerful intellect. Meaning he asked good questions and he had the ability to process and integrate that knowledge that he was bequeathed into an overarching way of looking at the world. And that that asking questions is very important, but then also that if someone asks you a question that you don't know, is that you say, I don't know. And one of the early scholars that he said is that half of knowledge is la adri, shabi. He said, nisf al-ilm la adri. Half of knowledge is saying, I don't know. And this was the sunnah of the scholars that came before us, is that when they didn't know something, they said, I don't know. And Imam al-Ghazali brings a very vivid, with very vivid imagery. He really drives this point home. And he says, for someone to speak about the affair of the deen, it would be a lesser sin for him to, and this is his words, so it's not mine. It would be a lesser sin for him to fornicate with his mother, billah, in the Kaaba, than for him to speak about the deen without knowledge. That the deen is something that it requires specialists at times, and that we have to have sound knowledge that we present, and that the requirements for that oftentimes are great, and that we have to fulfill prerequisites. And if we don't fill those prerequisites, then we ask someone who doesn't know. فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلِ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the people of dhikr, of remembrance, if you yourself do not know. And that la adri, saying I don't know, was the way of the scholars that came before us. And we've been mentioning Imam Malik a lot today. And here's another great example of this. Because at one time he was asked over 70 questions, and he only responded to a little over 30. There's different narrations that say how many he responded to, but he only responded to a portion of those questions. And then that this man who came from Andalusia, that he said that I'm going to go back, and that these people are waiting for me to give them answers of Imam Malik, that of these questions that I have. And Imam Malik said, tell them that Imam Malik la yadri. Imam Malik doesn't know. Tell him that Malik doesn't know. And this is even the sunnah of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that there is a hadith where that one of the Sahaba came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and asked him what were the best of places. And the Prophet said, La adri. Right? I don't know. That hatta as'al Jibreel. Wait until I ask Gabriel. Then the Prophet asked Gabriel, and Gabriel said, La adri, I don't know, wait until I ask Mikael. And so he then asked Mikael, and then Mikael informed Gabriel that خير البقاع مساجدها وشر البقاع أسواقها. And then the Prophet narrated this hadith, is that the best of places are the masajid, and the most evil of places are the marketplaces. And that this is the reason, because that the mosque is the place of divine mercy. It is one of the greatest places that once we enter into the sanctuary of the Bayt of Allah, is that we can resemble the angels. Whereas the marketplace and the souk is a place of desire. It's a place of ghafla. That there is one of the best du'as, that one of the best du'as that we can say when we enter into the marketplace, and of all of the various things that we can say that from the fadal al-a'mal to attain great merit and reward, is the dua for the marketplace. The Prophet ﷺ said, whoever enters into a marketplace and says that La ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah, lahul mulk wa lahul hamd, yuhyi wa yumit wa huwa hayyun la yamutu biyadihi al-khair wa huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir. Whoever says this, it will be written for him alf hasana. He will attain 1,000,000 good deeds, and they'll be removed from him alf sayyah. 1,000,000 bad deeds will be taken away, and he'll be lifted alf daraja. 1,000,000 degrees he will be raised. And that marketplace, subhanAllah, now, even when you're in your home in front of your computer and you're buying things online, make the dua. That all these opportunities that we have now, that traditionally in traditional societies, if you ever traveled into the Muslim world, that in a traditional society is that the souk would be in one particular place. That people would go to that place, and then there wasn't, there might be occasionally neighborhood store here and there, but for the most part it was in one particular place where people would come and then they would go back. Now, however, is it that we're literally inundated in the consumer world in which we live, and that we're made to believe that we need all of these things, and that we buy into a lot of this, and oftentimes waste a lot of our wealth for what reason? That's one of the great things, and this is something that one of them was asked. I believe it was Thomas Cleary. You have to, some of the things I'm saying, like I said, when you start fasting, sometimes you forget references where they trace back to. I believe it was Thomas Cleary. He delivered a lecture series about that, what he felt, and he was asked the question that what can Islam offer the modern world? And one of the things that he said was that the idea of frugality, being frugal with your wealth, and that zuhud, detaching. That imagine what a statement that is to the consumer world. The whole basis of the modern economic system is built upon buying things. Right? Quite simply, that if there's not money being spent and people aren't purchasing, that this is a serious problem for the way that the modern economic system has been structured. And that so much of the way that even other economies relate to one another, even currencies, whether they rise or fall, relates to that what is the GDP of that country, how much are they producing, and how much are they spending. And that for us, that this is a very foreign thing, at least to our deen theoretically, whereas oftentimes, unfortunately, that in many places within the Muslim world is that consumerism has reached a level that makes Fifth Avenue look like it's for children, and la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Anyhow, that learning how to say I don't know. This was the sunnah of our Prophet ﷺ. This was the sunnah of the righteous that came before us, and this is something is that we should be honored actually to say, because if you find someone that every question they ask you that they never say I don't know, you should actually be wary. That it's actually a good sign when you with teachers that say I don't know, because that when they say I don't know and they're willing to admit that what that means is that when they do answer you, they're answering you based upon knowledge. So you can trust what it is that they're saying. And that this is from the afat, and that what is it oftentimes that propels people to say things that they really don't know? Oftentimes it is the fear of looking stupid in the eyes of people. Is that they're asked questions that they maybe should know, but they can't, so that if they don't answer that question, then the people in the crowd are no longer going to hold them in as high esteem as they did before. And this is why one of my early teachers, that he said to a fellow student, that he said, you better study hard. He said, because when you go back, is that people are going to ask you. And the nature of the time that we live in is that you spend 2 years overseas or study for a short time, and that people think that you're the mufti of the thaqalain, you're the mufti of the dunya, and they expect you to ask questions. And I remember coming back one time, this was, oh goodness, it was in like the year 2000, I think, and the Bay Area was where I'm from, and that the rihla at that point was in the Bay Area, and Shaykh Hamza had excused himself for that day's class, so I filled in on a Maliki Fiqh class, and that someone asked a question there that was very complicated, and I wasn't able to answer it. I said, I don't know, Allah. And then so I asked Shaykh Abdullah bin Bayyah was visiting during that time, so I asked Shaykh Abdullah bin Bayyah, and he said, I don't know. Right, so he went and actually got the Sharh al-Dardir in Hashiyat al-Dusuki al-Dardir, which is the commentary and the marginal notes, the gloss of the book of Fatwa and the Maliki method, the method of Khalil, and then he had to look up the answer. So when that happened, I was like, alhamdulillah. Right? But this is a part of our deen.
You should know the relationship between patience and faith is like the relationship between the head and the body.
Allahu Akbar. MashaAllah. These need to be written in beautiful calligraphy and placed upon our walls to remind us of these meanings. That the relationship between patience and faith is one of the head and the body. Is that you don't see people, their head gets cut off just kind of walking down the street, right? That without a head, there's no life. There's no real life, even if they could survive for a short period of time. And that likewise, without patience, that there's no reality to the deen. And patience is one of the most difficult things of all, because there's nothing else that you can do except be patient. That there's no patience. And that, again, is that we have to understand that acquiring these virtues in our time is not easy, because we live in a time of instant gratification, where we could go up to the climate control there, and instead of having it at 72 degrees, that we can have it at 73 degrees, or we can make it 71, and some of them we can even do 71.5, and that we can control to a, manipulate our environment in a very, very precise and detailed fashion, and that we get used to this, and we get used to instant gratification in the age of credit cards, in the age of internet access, in the age of fast food meals and so forth. However, is that when it comes, this is difficult, because if you get used to that, it's detrimental in relation to your deen, and that we have to teach ourselves patience. I remember that I experienced, and sometimes you don't learn these meanings until you go through an experience. I remember one of the first time that I started to be open to the meaning of tahammul. That tahammul relates to patience. Patience is slightly different, but tahammul is being patiently bearing difficulty, which again is similar to patience. But hamala is to carry something. Tahammul is, carrying some. An example of tahammul, that if your child falls asleep, and say they're 8 years old now and they weigh 60 pounds, and you have to carry them 2 or 3 flights of stairs up, and that you carrying them while walking up those stairs, right, is not easy, right? To get up to the top, that's tahammul. You're enduring that, carrying that child that's heavy up 2 or 3 flights of stairs. And I remember that in Mauritania they like these Land Cruisers because they can go in the desert, and that they would pack these things full of stuff, and everyone's, all kinds of things, and then they'd put a net over it to keep all the stuff in it. And then on top of that is that they'd have people all over the car, like literally all over the car. That there would be like not just one person in the front seat. Why would you do that when you can fit 2 or 3? There would be more people in the front seat, and then the cabin, right? They'd get another 5 or 6 people in there, and then as many people that could possibly pile on the back, right, would pile on. As long as you're hanging onto the net, you're good. And then sometimes even people, just all over the car. And so you're going through the desert, and they don't drive slowly, and they're weaving in and out and this and that, and all you're doing is just holding on to your life. You're holding on to this net, and that we're used to sitting on soft carpet and so forth. I remember the first time I rode a donkey in Mauritania. Right? We're so weak, we tend to forget. That if any one of us galloped on a horse right now, we'd be sore for the next week, if not bruised, and we're become effeminate. And you're holding on to dear life to this net, and he's weaving in and out and this type of thing, and your rear hurts, your hands are starting to swell up because you're holding on to this net. But the point is like, that's where I realized, like, this is what tahammul is, right? It's like, that's how the dunya is that you're along for this ride, and it's not a joke, it's a real thing, and you're just holding on for dear life, and you don't know what's going to happen, and there's times where you have to literally just hold on like that. And that when you recognize that, though, and you can process that, it enables you to be able to at least do what it is that you can do to succeed in those circumstances that Allah Ta'ala has placed you in. So that patience, this is what it is it is to the deen what the head is to the physical body.
When the head is cut off, the entire body dies. Therefore, if you hear something that angers you or offends your honor, pardon the perpetrator and overlook the slight. That is firmness of purpose.
MashaAllah, tabarakallah. This is now getting to be more and more difficult is that when people start speaking ill of you, subhanAllah, I have to say just a funny little story, that, here, mashallah, it's amazing how much people love Islam. You just walk down the street, people acknowledge you. People that aren't even Muslims send salams to you. It's something that most of my life I've spent in a suburb that is not necessarily the case oftentimes in the suburbs. And it's a beautiful thing to see. We went to the store, to Trader Joe's down Highway 1 here, and that all of a sudden you walk in and it's a whole different world. And as I'm walking out, and I have my 3 children, and a thing full of groceries, that I was attempting to simultaneously prevent my kids from getting hit by a car, and get them in the car, put my groceries in. And there was this lady that was parked next to me in her black Mercedes, and I left my the driver's seat door open. And she was just standing there in the street. I was like, what's this lady doing? Right? While I'm doing this whole thing, right? Not realizing that I left my door open. And then that I, put the groceries in, and then took the cart back, and I come back, and she's still standing there. And then I walk over, and I realize that my door was open such that she couldn't get into her car. And that I realized, I was like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that my door was blocking. Were you in? And she was just so rude. Oh my God, she was so rude. And that you just start, all of a sudden in that moment, you're just like, there's something that you want to say to just Yani, and that's where Deen comes in, because like Yani, hello, I have 3 children and I'm putting groceries in my car. And big deal, just move my door and get in your darn car. What's wrong with you, lady? Like, what's wrong with you? Right? It's not that big a deal, you know what I'm saying? It's like, just like her whole day is like, Yani, now I've been affected, and now they're going to tell the story at dinner, and this person wearing this white little hat. By the way, 2 people thought in Trader Joe's that I worked there, right? 2 people asked me, wow, what is the price of it? I don't know, I don't work here. But alhamdulillah, mashallah. But when that happens, that if you hear something that angers you or offends your honor, ooh, this is where Deen comes in. That pardon the perpetrator and overlook the slight. That is firmness of purpose. Right? How to do that? That is very difficult. Especially if you're on the receiving end of that. That is a very difficult thing to do. And to be the better of the 2 people. And that in Muslim, mu'min la yudhillu nafsuh. A believer never lowers himself or humiliates himself. But if you carry yourself in the proper way, with dignity, in the way that our Prophet has taught us to carry ourselves, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then people mistreat you or transgress against you, how do you carry yourself? How do you carry yourself? This is one of the great tests for all of us across the board. This is one of the great tests. And that's there's so many stories of inspiration of those that came before us. That the way that they then dealt with and treated the people that had oppressed them and the people that had transgressed against them. And that when they were then put in a position of power, how did they deal with them? The greatest of all is the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and many of the Sada Sahabat Kiram, and generations, from the likes of Salahuddin Ayyubi until fairly recent times, the likes of Amir Abdul Qadir al-Jazairi. When you read stories about these people, you recognize that is my Deen. That is the Deen that I joined. And on the contrary, when you hear about stories other than that there's something about the fitrah of the human being, our natural state, is that it doesn't sit well with us, right? And that this is a time of great fitna. But these stories, when you read of these types of people, these are the people, the real people of Deen. These are the real people of Deen. And that, you have these glimpses into this. That one of my teachers, when he came to visit the United States, and this is at this time, now I think they've gotten rid of them. Those, I forget the names of the scanners that they had, but there was 2 different kinds that they had. One was more revealing than the other, so that we were planning the trips on where we could go so that we could avoid these scanners, because we didn't want to put our teacher through this. And so that we reached this one point where we didn't know there was a scanner, and there was, and so he opted out, and the search is even worse oftentimes than the scanner. because of just the way that they search you going way up into anyhow that my teachers got searched in this way, and for someone a dignified person, right? Like these things wouldn't happen in the Muslim world, right? Unless there's a dark side, yes. That if you're, but in general, these things don't happen there. So that that there's, and this very much was a part of Muslim society. They actually mention in the books that there's certain ways of ta'zir, where that they would punish people who did things wrong, minor infractions, by knocking their turban off in public, and that was considered to be like, a way of dishonoring that person, right? But then I asked my teacher, and I apologized. I said, please forgive me. This is, And he said that just their mashhad, he was totally positive, never even said anything to him. He said that what did our Prophet ﷺ go through in order to convey this need? He said they were just patting me down, right? That's the way that they look at these things. Is that they have an entirely different way of looking at things, and that Amir Abdul Qadir al-Jazairi is amazing. I would, there's a, my memory is failing me right now, that there's a book written about him. Anyone remember the title of that book? The Commander of the Faithful, by Kaiser, is it? Alan Kaiser? That Commander of the Faithful, and the Zaytuna's publication, Frequency Seasons, had a very nice article about him. I would read the story of his life. His life is amazing. And that, he was a very righteous man, and he was a saint. Allah Ta'ala knows best. And that he was someone that when he was fighting against the French, because he was an Algerian during the time of this late period in the late 19th century, where it became very popular for Western Europeans when they went on a conquest of imperialism and acquiring colonial states. It happened long before that as well, but it became especially popular in the late 19th century, where that there was just this rush of colonialism throughout the Muslim world, and literally throughout the known world, where people were trying to gather up territories wherever they could, and that the worst of this happened on the hands of the British and the French, that everyone else tried to get their part in it, the Dutch and the Germans a little bit, and a few others. However, that he was a part of that resistance that was pushing back the French, and that whenever he would capture French soldiers, is that he would have special guards that would guard them, and he would separate the men and the women, and that he would guard the men so that no tribal members would come and try to take retribution for any of the tribal members that were killed. And he would protect the soldiers that were prisoners of war. And he would protect the women as well so that they wouldn't get raped. And he was a person that to this day that is held in very high regard because of who he was. But when he ended up being exiled because that they were unable to defend themselves against the French, he ends up in Syria. He ends up in Damascus, and his house to this day is still known, and he actually has descendants to this day. And that when there was a fitna that took place between the Druze and the Maronite Christians of Syria, of Damascus, that the Druze were going to wage war against the Christians. And these Christians they're protected peoples. They're Ahl al-Dhimma. And that our Prophet ﷺ said that Man adha dhimmiyan faqad adhani. Whoever harms a dhimmi, a non-Muslim that is under the protectorate of the Islamic State, they have harmed me. Our Prophet ﷺ also said, Man qatala mu'ahadan lam yarah ra'ihat al-jannah. This is in Bukhari. Whoever kills someone that the Muslims have a treaty with, they will never smell the scent of paradise. And this is why these things are very dangerous. You have to be very careful in the things that you do. And so Amir Abdul Qadir al-Jazairi tried to ward them off, and tried to get them he tried to pour water on this fire and to take care of the situation. It didn't work. Is that when they wanted to march upon the Christians, Amir Abdul Qadir al-Jazairi, is that he gathered his troops that still remained with him. He said, get ready to fight a war that is just as the war that we were fighting before. Meaning that pushing out the French who were trying to occupy Algeria. In this case, protecting Christians from Druze, which is a sect of Islam. Because that war was unjust for them to do that. and that he hid himself personally in his own house and in some of the houses of those that were around him, and saved the lives of about 10,000 Christians. Abraham Lincoln wrote him a letter of gratitude because of this act. And it doesn't matter about the letter of Lincoln or what anyone else thinks. The point is that we are people of principle. We are people of principle. And that if we're weak such that we respond in an un-Islamic fashion to oppression or the way other people treat us, that's our own weakness. But that we have to separate between our own weakness and our deen. There's a difference between deen and between weakness. Deen and weakness. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ was asked about all these different people that are fighting fi sabilillah. This is combat, martial combat, warfare. And the Prophet ﷺ negated everything, that especially vengeance. We do not fight out of vengeance as believers. And the Prophet ﷺ said that the person that fights لِتَكُنْ كَلِمَةُ اللَّهِ الْعُلْيَا, is that the word of Allah remains supreme. This is the person that is fi sabilillah. Not as the person who fights in order that he may attain status in the hearts of people. Not the person that fights out of vengeance. All of these other reasons that are lowly and base. This is not the state of a believer. We are people of principle. And Allah Ta'ala says in the Quran, لا يجرمنكم شنآن قوم على أن لا تعدلوا اعدلوا هو أقرب للتقوى. That a jarima is a crime and it's a sin. Allah says, لا يجرمنكم, that don't let, the shana'an is the hatred, never let the hatred of a people cause you to commit a crime. Jarrama yujarrimu is to make someone else commit a jarima. So it's to make someone else sin or to commit a crime. And he said, never let the hatred of a people cause you to commit a crime. I'dilu, that be just. Ala ala ta'dilu. Don't ever let the hatred of a people cause you to not be just. Be just, it is closer to piety, it's closer to taqwa. I said, this is the principle that we operate upon. Where every single person on the face of this earth to deal unjustly is that we are commanded to deal with justice. We are supposed to be just even against our own selves. We are just even against people of our own family members. We do not have a tribal mentality. Islam came to eliminate the negative aspects of tribalism. And that we are people that stand for truth and justice. Right? Even from people within our own ranks that are doing something wrong, we call a spade a spade. And when Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid, and the proof of that is when Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid was in a battle up to the north, and he did something without the permission of the Prophet ﷺ, the Prophet was angry. And he said, أَنَا بَرِيءٌ مِمَّا فَعَلَ Khalid, that I am free from what Khalid did. He distanced himself from the act of what Khalid did. Now, he's the Sayfullah al-Maslul. He's the unsheathed sword of Allah, right, here on earth. However, that when it came to that thing that was wrong, the Prophet ﷺ cannot condone wrong. Even if it's from someone like Khalid. Even if it's from someone like Osama ibn Zayd, who is the Hibbu Rasulillah. He's the beloved of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When he was fighting in a battle and he was about to take the man's life, and that the man said Shahada. He said, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, and he killed him. And he comes back and it's presented to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was angry. He says, did you kill him after he said it? Did you kill him after he said it? And he said, Ya Rasulullah. Right? He only said that out of nifaq and out of hypocrisy. He said, Halla shaqaqta sadra. Did you split open his chest? And Osama was rebuked so severely by the Prophet ﷺ that he said that I wish that I wouldn't have become Muslim until after that day. And this is the beloved of the Prophet ﷺ. Right? We are people of principle, period. Period. We always are required to take the upper hand. And that if we can do this, this is strength. This is strength. And that to me, this is one of the only things that gives me solace when you look at what is happening in the Muslim world. If you really look closely in one country, in one city, in one country, look at what is happening in Homs. That if you even look at even one city in one country, that it's so difficult to really bear, that when you really know what is going on, that you can't even eat or sleep, let alone that all of the five top countries that have refugees, they're all Muslim countries. all 5 top countries of refugees are all Muslim countries, and that it's a really drastic and difficult situation. But what gives you solace in all of this is that despite all of this, is that we have to be people of principle. No matter how frustrated, no matter how much anger that we have, is that we never leave our principles. And perhaps that just as during the time of the Mughals, this is something that my supervisor pointed out in one of his articles, Sayyid Abdul Hakim Marad, is that he noticed that the Mughal invasion to Tatar was vicious, that they almost wiped out Islam completely. Were it not to be that the Mamluk army of Egypt that routed them, that if they would have beat the Mamluks of Egypt, that it would have been a serious problem. They almost wiped out Islam entirely. They just completely devastated all of Central Asia. And it was just the stories of the Mongol invasion are horrific. But within 1 century, right, they become Muslim. SubhanAllah. And they become some of the great proponents and bearers of Islam. And what my teacher said in this regard is that perhaps is that this is going to happen as well. The darkness of the days of colonialism are still here with us, and that the imperialistic tendencies have not left the Western European people. Just look around what is happening to the world. However, that our hope is that if we can maintain our integrity, that Allah Ta'ala will change our condition, and the end of the day is that people will realize at one point is that who has moral superiority? Who are the people of Haqq? I heard one of the most touching stories I've ever heard in my life. I was in England not too long ago. We were doing a program in Manchester, and there was this particular individual that he's a British convert that was documenting all of the athar, all of the special relics and special places in the masajid that are in Quds, that are in Jerusalem and the surrounding areas that Allah Ta'ala says that He's placed blessing in around that area. And this is the Holy Land for us as believers, as Muslims as well. And he's documented all these places. And that he told the story that was amazing, that he channels charity into, he knows people there that they can then pass out zakat and charity. And a friend of his wanted to give charity. And keep in mind, these people are in dire need. And these are people that are neighbors of Masjid al-Aqsa, and they're in dire need, and that they have very little assistance, domestic or from abroad. And that this person wanted to give some charity, so this man told him to give it to Shaykh Fulan or Shaykh Fulan, that you'll find them near Masjid al-Aqsa. And this person actually happened to be a Jewish convert, and he went to Tel Aviv for a wedding and didn't have much time, so he goes to visit Masjid al-Aqsa, and he's looking for these 2 people to pass the charity to, and he couldn't find them. So he sees one of the guards of Masjid al-Aqsa and says, "Look, I have this charity that I'm supposed to give it to Fulan or Fulan, so-and-so or so-and-so, can you please give it to them?" And then he leaves. And that a year later, the British convert goes to visit, and he sees some of these people that he knows and so forth, and he reminds me, he says that there was a person that I sent like a year ago who came that said he wanted to give charity, and I told him to give it to so-and-so or so-and-so, and they said, "You know about that?" He said, "Yeah," and he said, "Come with me," and they go, and he takes them to their office, and he unlocks the drawer, and he opens up the drawer, and there's an envelope there. It had never been opened. And they said that we received this envelope, and that we didn't know who this envelope came from. And it's obviously filled with money, but they never opened it. They said because we were worried that we didn't know how to spend it or what cause it's supposed to go for, because that no one told us how we should spend this money, so we left it here. An entire year passed. These are people that are in dire need, that don't even have the essentials of life, and they have that degree. That is Iman. They wouldn't even open up the envelope out of fear of dispensing that money in other than the way of the person who gave the money and how they wanted it to be dispensed. What kind of person is that? Right? That is That's the deen that I'm a part of. Right? That is our deen. And these are the people of the deen. And this is one of the most beautiful things, that despite all of the dysfunctionality in the Muslim world, all of the problems that we see happening, is that this is something that we still preserve as the Ummah of La ilaha illallah. Is that we still have these people, and we should always take into consideration is that Allah Ta'ala said about this Ummah, Kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat lin-nas. Yes, it is conditional upon what Allah Ta'ala mentions, but it also, Allah Ta'ala is telling us, is that you are the best of nations sent forth to mankind. Yawm al-Qiyamah, when it's all said and done, and the Ummah of the Prophet ﷺ will be standing before all of the other Ummah on Yawm al-Qiyamah, people will see who the Prophet is, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He will see who the Sahaba were. People will all see who the Ummah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that was and is and will be. And that this is the greatest honor of all, is to be from our Prophet's Ummah, but that we have to live these meanings. And just as that there's some people that have been showed a different side, is that if we stick to our principles, that Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala, that the tides could turn overnight, completely turn overnight. And that what oftentimes is in many places in Western Europe and the United States of America, that people are hostile towards Islam and Muslims, that could change overnight. And that there could be people that see the beauty, and that then once it, I really believe this, and that I, there's a lot of people, America is a very interesting place, and I come from a family that I know this mentality very deeply, is that there's many people that think that they're self-sufficient and they're not in need of anything, and that they're so happy with everything that they have, is that they don't feel, they're not compelled to search. And that also mixed in there as well is a bit of arrogance, and that if people can get through these internal barriers that they have that are preventing them, that such that they then take an objective view of the personage of Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that they look closely to his sunnah, the Prophet is irresistible. Sayyidina Muhammad, he's irresistible. Is it his sunnah that will completely captivate you, and it will take you over. And then the more and more that you're exposed to its beauty, it'll open up doors of connection to him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that there's no longer words that can express the beauty of that. It's something that you're living then the sweetness of faith and the realities of the pleasures of what it means to say La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah. And that these were expressed by Sadat and the Sahaba. There was one companion that he used to be bothered when he'd be spending time with his family, and he would go out to see the Prophet ﷺ, and he would tell him, Ya Rasulullah, that I would be spending time with my family, and I would think about you, and I would become so discomforted I had to just leave and come see you. He wasn't calmed until he actually saw the Prophet ﷺ. These are Sahaba. The Prophet ﷺ didn't say, no, that's I need too much love, just worship your Lord, that's too... No. There's a number of stories that are of a similar nature. The Sahaba were madly in love with Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And you could even argue that this emotion of love was what enabled them to do everything that they were able to do. This is the heart and the foundation and the teleological goal, the whole purpose of this religion is to be muhibbeen and mahbubeen, is to attain love of Allah and to be beloved to Allah. In the dunya and the barzakh and the akhirah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us, inshallah ta'ala, open up our hearts to these meanings, and to bless us to have the reality of faith penetrate the innermost aspect of our being. May Allah ta'ala bless us to be people of patience, bless us to be people of faith, bless us to be people who maintain the moral high ground in every situation that we're in, learn how to forgive people and overcome in that particular moment, in such that we look long term. The most important thing of which is that people be guided. May the guidance, may the light of guidance of the Anwar of Islam spread all throughout these lands, inshallah ta'ala. People be exposed to the irresistible nature of the Sunnah of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, fill our hearts with the love and assist us in these days of fasting, and bless us to be able to expose to His mercy to Tabarak wa Ta'ala in all of our different states, accept from us and assist us and make us strong and give us tawfiq in all of our affairs. Sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Alhamdulillah. I thought we troubled you today. We didn't read much, but we just had you.
Inshallah, we will be reading Surah Yasin. And we're going to read inshallah, 80 salawats on the Prophet. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباءهم فهم غافلون لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أأنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاء المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون أأتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغن عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا يؤمنون إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون وإن كل لما جميع الذين يحضرون وآية لهم الأرض الميتة وأحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وأعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملت أيديهم أفلا يشكرون سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالعرجون القديم لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وآية لهم أنا حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا من لم يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين لا ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخسرون فلا يستطيعون توصيلهم ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون ونفخ في الصور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ننسل قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كان إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع الذين مضطرون فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواج في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم أن لا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم ونشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نعلمهم نجلس في الخطيئة فلا يعقلون وما علمنا الشعر ما ينبغي له وإلى ذكر قرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وذللناهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب فلا يشكرون اتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند محضرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم يرى الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال به الله وهي رميم قل هي الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا تجرى أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم إنما هو إذا أراد شيئا يقول له كن فيكون سبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون.
من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله احد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا احد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله احد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا احد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله احد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا احد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل اعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق ومن شر غاسق اذا وقب ومن شر النفاثات في العقد ومن شر حاسد اذا حسد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل اعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق ومن شر غاسق اذا وقب ومن شر النفاثات في العقد ومن شر حاسد اذا حسد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل اعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق من شر غاسق إذا وقب ومن شر النفاثات في العقد ومن شر حاسد إذا حسد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس ربي أعوذ بك من همزات الشياطين وأعوذ بك ربي أن يحضرون ربي أعوذ بك من همزات الشياطين وأعوذ بك ربي أن يحضرون ربي أعوذ بك من همزات الشياطين وأعوذ بك ربي أن يحضرون أفحسبتم أنما خلقناكم عبثا وأنكم إلينا لا ترجعون فتعالى الله الملك الحق لا إله إلا هو رب العرش الكريم ومن يدع مع الله إلها فلا برهان له به بالنساء عند ربه إنه لا يفلح الكافرون وقل رب اغفر وارحم وأنت خير الراحمين وسبحان الله حين تمسون وحين تصبحون ويخرج السماوات والأرض وحين تظهرون يخرج الحي من الميت ويخرج الميت من الحي أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم لو أنزلنا هذا القرآن على جبل لرأيته خاشعا متصدعا من خشية الله وتلك الأمثال نضربها للناس لعلهم يتفكرون هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الغيب والشهادة الرحمن الرحيم هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الملك القدوس السلام المؤمن المهيمن العزيز الجبار المتكبر سبحان الله عما يشركون والله الخالق البارئ المصور له الأسماء الحسنى يسبح له السماوات والأرض وهو العزيز الحكيم سلام على نوح في العالمين إنا كذلك نجزي المحسنين أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات من شر ما خلق أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات من شر ما خلق أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات من شر ما خلق بسم الله الذي لا يضر مع اسمه شيء في الأرض ولا في السماء وهو السميع العليم بسم الله الذي لا يضر مع اسمه شيء في الأرض ولا في السماء وهو السميع العليم بسم الله الذي لا يضر مع اسمه شيء في الأرض ولا في السماء وهو السميع العليم اللهم إني أمسيت منك بنعمة وعافية وستر فأعطني نعمتك علي وعافيتك وسترك بالدنيا والآخرة اللهم إني أمسيت منك بنعمة وعافية وستر فأعطني نعمتك علي وعافيتك وسترك بالدنيا والآخرة اللهم إني أمسيت منك بنعمة وعافية وستر فأعطني نعمتك علي وعافيتك وسترك بالدنيا والآخرة اللهم إني أمسيت بك وجدت عملة عرشك وملائكتك وجميع خلقك أنك أنت الله لا إله إلا أنت وحدك لا شريك لك وأنت سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك اللهم إني أمسيت بك وجدت عملة عرشك وملائكتك وجميع خلقك أنك أنت الله لا إله إلا أنت وحدك لا شريك لك وأنت سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك اللهم إني أمسيت بك وجدت عملة عرشك وملائكتك وجميع خلقك أنك أنت الله لا إله إلا أنت وحدك لا شريك لك وأنت سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك اللهم إني أمسيت بك وجدت عملة عرشك وملائكتك وجميع خلقك أنك أنت الله لا إله إلا أنت وحدك لا شريك لك وأنت سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا يوافي نعمه ويكافي مزيدا الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا يوافي نعمه ويكافي مزيدا الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا يوافي نعمه ويكافي مزيدا آمنت بالله العظيم وكفرت بجبر الطاغوت واستمسكت بالعروة وقالت انفصام لها والله السميع العليم آمنت بالله العظيم وكفرت بجبر الطاغوت واستمسكت بالعروة وقالت انفصام لها والله السميع العليم آمنت بالله العظيم وكفرت بجبر الطاغوت واستمسكت بالعروة وقالت انفصام لها والله السميع العليم ورضيت بالله ربا وبالإسلام دينا وبسيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم نبيا ورسولا ورضيت بالله ربا وبالإسلام دينا وبسيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم نبيا ورسولا رضيت بالله ربا وبالإسلام دينا وبسيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم نبيا ورسولا حسبي الله لا إله إلا الله عليه توكلت وهو رب العرش العظيم حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلت وهو رب العرش العظيم حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلت وهو رب العرش العظيم حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلت وهو رب العرش العظيم حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلت وهو رب العرش العظيم حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلت وهو رب العرش العظيم حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلت وهو رب العرش العظيم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم 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 اللهم إني أسألك من فجاءة الخير وأعوذ بك من فجاءة الشر اللهم أنت ربي لا إله إلا أنت خلقتني وأنا عبدك وأنا على عهدك ووعدك ما استطعت. أعوذ بك من شر ما صنعت. أعوذ بك من نعمتك علي بذنبي فاغفر لي فإنه لا يغفر الذنوب إلا أنت. اللهم أنت ربي لا إله إلا أنت خلقتني وأنت رب العرش العظيم. ما شاء الله كان وما لم يشاء لم يكن. ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. أعلم أن الله على كل شيء قدير. أن الله قد أحاط بكل شيء علما. اللهم إني أعوذ بك من شر نفسي ومن شر كل دابة أنت آخذ بنصيحتها. إن ربي على صراط مستقيم. يا حي يا قيوم برحمتك أستغيث ومن عذابك أستجير. أصلح لي شأني كله ولا تكلني إلى نفسي ولا إلى أحد من خلقك. اللهم إني أعوذ بك من الهم والحزن وأعوذ بك من العجز والكسل وأعوذ بك من الجبن والبخل وأعوذ بك من قلب الدين وجهل الرجال. اللهم إني أسألك العافية في الدنيا والآخرة. اللهم إني أسألك العفو والعافية ومعافاة الدائرة في الدين والدنيا والأهل والمال. اللهم استر أولادي وأمن روعاتي. اللهم اغفر من بين يدي وخلفي وعن يميني وعن شمالي ومن فوقي من تحتي. اللهم أنت خلقتني وأنت تهديني وأنت تطعمني وأنت تسقيني وأنت تميتني وأنت تحييني وأنت على كل شيء قدير. أمسينا على فطرة الإسلام وعلى كلمة الإخلاص وعلى دين نبينا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى ملة أبينا إبراهيم حنيفا مسلما ولا كان من المشركين. اللهم بك أمسينا بك أصبحنا بك نحيا بك نموت وعليك نتوكل وإليك المصير. أمسينا وسأل مغفر الله والحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم إني أسألك خير هذه الليل فتحها ونصرها ونورها وبركاتها وهداها. اللهم إني أسألك خير هذه الليل وخير ما فيها وخير ما قبلها وخير ما بعدها. وأعوذ بك من شر هذه الليل وشر ما فيها وشر ما قبلها وشر ما بعدها. اللهم ما أنسى من نعمة أو بأحد من خلقك فمنك وحدك لا شريك لك فلك الحمد ولك الشكر على ذلك. سبحان الله بحمده عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته. سبحان الله بحمده عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته. سبحان الله بحمده عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته. سبحان الله العظيم بحمده عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته. سبحان الله العظيم وبحمده سبحان الله العظيم وبحمده عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته. سبحان الله عدد ما خلق في السماء. سبحان الله عدد ما خلق في الأرض. سبحان الله عدد ما بين ذلك. سبحان الله عدد ما هو خالق. الحمد لله عدد ما خلق في السماء. الحمد لله عدد ما خلق في الأرض. الحمد لله عدد ما بين ذلك. الحمد لله عدد ما هو خالق. لا إله إلا الله عدد ما خلق السماء. لا إله إلا الله عدد ما خلق الأرض. لا إله إلا الله عدد ما بين ذلك. لا إله إلا الله عدد ما هو خالق. الله أكبر عدد ما خلق السماء. الله أكبر عدد ما خلق الأرض. عدد ما بين ذلك. الله أكبر عدد ما هو خالق. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم عدد ما خلق السماء. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم عدد ما خلق الأرض. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم عدد ما بين ذلك. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم عدد ما هو خالق. لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له له الملك وله الحمد يحيي ويميت وهو على كل شيء قدير وعدد كل درجة ألف مرة. لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له له الملك وله الحمد يحيي ويميت وهو على كل شيء قدير وعدد كل درجة ألف مرة. لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له له الملك وله الحمد يحيي ويميت وهو على كل شيء قدير وعدد كل درجة ألف مرة. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد مفتاح باب رحمة الله عدد ما فيه من الله صلاة والسلام دائمين وعلى الله وعلى آله وصحبه اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد مفتاح باب رحمة الله عدد ما فيه من الله صلاة والسلام دائمين وعلى الله وعلى آله وصحبه عدد كل درجة مرة. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد مفتاح باب رحمة الله عدد ما فيه من الله صلاة والسلام دائمين وعلى الله وعلى آله وصحبه عدد كل درجة مرة.